In our representative democracies, the public elects representatives and hopes they do what they promise to do. That worked well for a few decades. Clearly, powerful businessmen have had direct contacts to governments to influence decisions away from the public eye. Let's not call it corruption, just lobbying, which sounds much nicer. If you like a diagram or a picture, imagine a bow tie structure. The knot is the government, the elected few, and the long end of the tie represents the people, while the small end represents those wealthy, influential people. Over the years, however, the divide between the rich and the poor has been gapping wider and wider. According to The Guardian, while in 2008, at the height of the financial crisis, the 1% richest only owned 42.5% of the global wealth, since 2017, they owned more than 50%. This balance tipped even more in favor of the rich due to lockdown measures benefiting the big global players, which are too large to fail, while small traditional family-owned businesses will perish. Now the wealthy 1% owns the majority of wealth on this planet, so for all practical purposes, they are the majority. Governments, businesses, universities, in financial problems for years, depend on their financial support and gifts. So that now the government represents only the 1%, the majority, and not the regular people. The people instead have been brainwashed. They have been brainwashed in such a way that out of fear of a common cold, happily trade in basic rights and freedoms for security, following slogans blindly like cattle or a herd of sheep. They even collapsed the torturers. First in 2015, when the borders opened freely and the nation states ended. And even now, when the government takes away jobs, freedom of movement, social contacts, friends, family, and healthcare. Brainwashing is a kind of mass hypnosis, mass hysteria, indoctrination, and propaganda. Such manipulation requires great minds. I doubt that Boris Johnson, Emmanuel Macron, and even Angela Merkel, despite experience as a secretary of agitation and propaganda in former East Germany, came up with that. Tricking the mind requires experts and professionals. Adolf Hitler said, through clever and constant application of propaganda, people can be made to see paradise as hell and also the other way around, to consider the most wretched life as paradise. The Nazis were really good at controlling people's minds. Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda chief, once said that if you repeat a lie often enough, then people will believe it. He also pointed out that if you want to control a population and you have to deal with opposition, then you should accuse them of the sins and trickery which you yourself are using. Not surprisingly, governments have been accusing those who are telling the truth of speaking fake news, and the ones not following the party line as conspiracy theorists. Countries around the world have been promoting slogans to align public opinion with the government rules. In China, there was a slogan which said, "If you love your parents, lock them up." In Taiwan, people were told to visit each other is to kill each other. In the UK, it started harmless, with keep your distance or wash your hands regularly, following effortlessly from take back control and get Brexit done. Stay home, save lives, protect the NHS.
But in this fight, we can be in no doubt that each and every one of us is directly enlisted. Each and every one of us is now obliged to join together to halt the spread of this disease, to protect our NHS, and to save many, many thousands of lives. And therefore, I urge you, at this moment of national emergency, to stay at home, protect our NHS, and save lives. Thank you.
When I heard this in middle of March, I knew that all was a lie. How can staying at home, destroying the economy, locking up our kids, isolating old people, avoiding hospitals at all costs, closing dentistries for months do any good? Clearly, collateral damage of destroyed livelihoods, rise in suicides and domestic violence, and cancelled operations must create orders of magnitude more casualties. How can locking up 99.99% of the healthy population make any sense? It wouldn't even make sense under the bubonic plague, which killed large parts of the European population. It is like an IQ test, and shockingly most people fail. Another thing became clear. The rhythms of these phrases and slogans are no coincidence. It's behavioral psychology. Using phrases of 3 words presented in groups of 3 is a technique known as the rule of 3 in psychological conditioning. And that's the reason for the triple phrases with which we are bombarded. We have been trained and taught at the same time. Not surprisingly, this is also used by McKinsey, the consulting firm. They help solve problems in companies, that is, restructure and fire people the company bosses don't have the guts to do themselves. When these overpaid so-called consultants persuade the bosses to make certain tough decisions, they use pro tips. One of these is the rule of 3. Whenever you're trying to persuade a senior person to do something, always present 3 reasons. Not 2, not 4, but exactly 3. Why? 3 reasons. First, your argument gets their attention and is memorable. Second, you're forced to choose the 3 most important reasons. Third, you sound more structured, confident, and decisive when you speak. Hypnotherapists have pointed out that if we repeat phrases often enough, then the words and thoughts become implanted in the subconscious minds, ingrained like nursery rhymes and mnemonics. Hitler was also a believer that if a lie was repeated often enough, it would eventually be confused with the truth by the greater part of the population. People more readily fall victim to the big lie than the small lie, said Hitler, since it would never come into their heads to fabricate colossal untruths, and they would not believe that others could have the impudence to distort the truth so infamously. Hitler used these techniques to control and manipulate the German people to accept and do evil things. Similarly now, some people, the morally good and righteous people, the rule followers, the denouncers, the Karens, the little bullies, who feel strong with the big bullies, the government in their backs, exclaim, "If this crisis is just made up, why should all the countries implement similar rules? Why would so many health specialists say the same things?" Well, when they come with a needle, when they will lose their jobs, then they might start doing some thinking on their own. Or you can say confidently to them, "I can tell you 3 reasons for the global alignment of governments. First, the global financial system based on ever-growing debt and fiat money is at its end. And the ultra-rich hedge fund managers want to blame the collapse onto an external scapegoat, like a pandemic, while at the same time removing or buying up their competitors. Second, the ultra-rich are now the majority in wealth and don't want to share the planet with 7 billion other people, which just destroy the planet. A bit of genocide is good for the planet. Third, big global pharma and high-tech biotech companies realized that vaccinating, genetically modifying, tracking and controlling the world population like sheep is a great business model and application of AI-powered surveillance software. Adolf Hitler would be proud. If you want proof, just look up what the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funds. Look up the Digital Identity Alliance ID 2020, the Gavi Vaccine Alliance, UN's Agenda 2030 for transforming our world, the Big Reset of the World Financial Forum in January 2021, Event 201 last October, simulating a novel coronavirus pandemic, and the Peter Schwartz lockstep scenario in a document from the Rockefeller Foundation from 2010, and the list goes on and on. George Orwell, who invented Newspeak, a language to make unorthodox political thought impossible, also understood the importance of the triple phrase. In his dystopian novel 1984, he invented the slogan, "War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength." Later, the slogan in the UK became, stay alert, control the virus, save lives, in case people started to get tired of the first.
So step one from this week, those who cannot work from home should now speak to their employer about going back to work. You can now spend time outdoors and exercise as often as you like. You can meet one person outside of your household, outdoors, provided you stay 2 meters apart. Given we've taken the first step in carefully adjusting some of the measures today, and therefore our advice to people what to do, we've also updated our messaging. We're now asking people to stay alert, control the virus, and save lives.
Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
It is noticeable that the instructions we have been given have been more like orders. The signs that have popped up like dandelions say, stand here, not please stand here. Why not? I guess you don't say please to a prisoner. And there are the weeks of clapping for carers and medical staff. Clapping, which probably started innocently and with good intentions, covers up the paradox, the quiet insistent terrors that came from knowing that for all practical purposes there is no healthcare, and we have all been betrayed by politicians and bureaucrats who decided to devote entire healthcare programs to care for a relatively small number of patients who have or might be thought to have or be susceptible to a flu-like virus. Persuading people to do what you want them to do is part of hypnotherapy. Getting people to clap was also important, in that it made people believe in the danger of the virus and the bravery of those working to defeat it. It helped people accept the fact that there were no beds available for patients with cancer and other serious illnesses. The lame rainbow, which has suddenly started to appear everywhere, is another part of the brainwashing process. Thousands have been so successfully brainwashed that they willingly take part in promoting the symbols and slogans. Some social distancing rules, such as social bubbles and 1 meter plus, confuse people, but even they were part of the training program and kept people's minds busy, like a distraction, so they didn't look where they should have looked to understand the trickery. In fact, all the stupid rules about face masks, travel restrictions, hotspots are distractions to keep us busy, fearful and stressed. If you confuse and bewilder at the same time, that you are frightening people, then you unsettle them and you create an anxious, obedient population. Fascism, a term coined by Mussolini in the 1920s in Italy to describe the alignment of government, media and subsequently all people, is mushrooming everywhere, seeded by the elite, the 1% richest, the global corporations, big finance, big pharma, in all the media channels and pseudoscientific institutions, so their financial aids and philanthropic outreach programs, all under the disguise of helping people, curing their diseases. If you thought the media channels independently report the truth gathered by investigative journalists, think again. Big corporations create the news, a bit like ads or commercials, and the news agencies read them.
Millions of Americans staying at home are relying on Amazon.
Millions of Americans staying at home are relying on Amazon.
Millions of Americans staying at home are relying on Amazon.
Millions of Americans staying at home are relying on Amazon.
Amazon has transformed its operations in response to COVID-19 to protect employees and keep packages flowing.
Amazon has transformed its operations in response to COVID-19 to protect employees and keep packages flowing.
The company is keeping
keeping its employees safe and healthy while still delivering those packages to your doorstep.
The company is keeping employees safe and healthy.
The company is keeping its employees safe and healthy.
The company is keeping its employees safe and healthy.
The company is keeping its employees safe and healthy.
The company is keeping its employees safe and healthy.
The company is keeping its employees safe and healthy. The company is keeping its employees safe and healthy.
It spent $800 million on increased wages and overtime pay during the pandemic.
It has spent $800 million on increased wages and overtime pay during the pandemic.
It has spent $800 million on increased wages and overtime pay during the pandemic.
It has spent $800 million on increased wages and overtime pay during the pandemic.
Amazon says it has spent $800 million on increased wages and overtime pay during the pandemic.
If you thought the government is made of hard-working politicians who want the best for their people, think again. They do what Bill Gates and the other thugs tell them to do.
Through the partnerships launched today, we will intensify the search for a vaccine. We will strengthen the search for effective treatments and increase our diagnostics capacities.
Better diagnostics, treatments, and a safe and effective vaccine.
To ensure development and deployment of diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccine.
Diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines.
Equitable access to diagnostics, treatments, and vaccines.
Improving diagnostics, accelerating therapies, and ultimately developing a vaccine.
COVID-19 diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines.
Développement et du déploiement rapide de diagnostics, vaccins et traitements efficaces.
Gemeinsam an einem Impfstoff zu arbeiten, Medikamente bereitzustellen und diagnostische Mittel.
Thank you, Ursula, for your work and also for this global effort.
Servus Sebastian und vielen, vielen Dank an Österreich.
If you haven't woken up yet, now would be a good time.